we're going to see a really nice breakout in altcoins in the near future because we've simply broken through certain zones here that were extremely important. We absolutely have to talk about this now. However, at the moment, we still don't have any retail investors in the market, and why this might just be a small prelude to the mega altcoin season is what we'll discuss in this video. But first of all, you can go ahead and like the video and leave a nice comment to support it and help it reach as many people as possible. Thank you very much for that. Right now, we're seeing an absolutely beautiful breakout in the altcoins. Take a look at this. We really had this trend reversal line here, where you can clearly see that the whales, the smart money sold, there was a massive drop, and then we had some nice pullbacks where people got back in because they thought it would go up again. Then we hit resistance here again and saw some heavy sell-offs. All of that was really tough, and down here at some point the retail investors also sold. Way too late in the end. But here we had to turn around, look at this, and we broke out of this trend reversal line, and that definitely points to a bigger, strong upward trend. Not just a small upward trend, no, a bigger upward trend, because you can clearly see how sustainably we've broken out here by now. That is extremely important. It simply shows us that we're coming out of this disbelief phase with the altcoins and maybe slowly entering this hope phase, then the optimism phase, and eventually we could even experience that big euphoria phase here as well. Because it has to be said very clearly, with altcoins we've been in a complete bear market for the past 3 years. You can't deny that. We were in a bear market with the altcoins, but right now it looks more like we're seeing a breakout here and that we're slowly starting to move into a nice bigger uptrend with the altcoins as well. Because just imagine, if you look up altcoins on Google Trends, there's less interest than ever before. So we have as little interest here as we did during the deepest bear market times during the FTX crash. At the moment, no one is interested in altcoins, but that can change just as quickly, just as fast as we've seen Ethereum outperform Bitcoin by far in the second quarter so far. Look at how quickly things have turned around here. Ethereum was really the loser of the past few months, but look at how quickly it has caught up. Right now you can already see a bit of FOMO with Ethereum because institutional investors are slowly starting to buy up Ethereum with millions of dollars. With the ETFs, I think we had over 250 million in inflows just last week. That alone was already 1% of the entire Ethereum supply. So lately we've been seeing huge inflows here, and just look at Ethereum, how quickly things have turned around and how incredible the current demand for Ethereum is. And out of nowhere, the usage on Ethereum is also increasing accordingly. That means if Ethereum is already going up now, suddenly everything else is rising too. Suddenly everything fits, the on-chain data fits, the investments fit, the ETF inflows fit, and that's something you should be aware of. Once things turn around, it can become really massive. And I see exactly the same thing happening with the altcoin. With the altcoins, we are currently at a point where we've just broken out nicely, and this could definitely indicate the next major upward trend, which will probably also last for months. During this uptrend, we might see a small interim correction, but overall, we are very likely to experience a really significant upward trend here. Because if we take a look at this chart, for example, the chart of Dogecoin, back then, for example, we also had a sell-off here, the whales sold, the price dropped, then it went up again. Still, that was just a fake out. The correction kept getting more and more severe, and it was only when we had this breakout here that things really escalated dramatically. Just look at the kind of uptrend we had here with Dogecoin, and this chart pattern is exactly the same as the one we're seeing right now with the torted dry chart. Because right now we've also broken out of a massive downtrend here. Take a look at that. Such uptrends are intense, and once we break through them, you know exactly what happens. We can really escalate upwards from there. Of course, it's also important that we see a drop in Bitcoin dominance here. We've just seen a short-term drop of about 3%, but even just those 3% in Bitcoin dominance have already made such a huge difference for the altcoins, which is pretty crazy. Because all of a sudden, we have billion-dollar altcoins again that have seen tens of billions in inflows within just a few weeks. And that's just because of this 2 or 3% drop in Bitcoin dominance. Here I mainly look at Bitcoin dominance without including stablecoins because this measure of Bitcoin dominance is a bit more meaningful, and we were already almost at the 2021 level here. So we are already really in the top ranges here, but it's still clear that we're in a zone where people aren't exactly risk-loving. The lower we go, the more risk-tolerant people become. That's why I'm definitely keeping a close eye on this right now. Because this exact chart that I just showed you is exactly what we can also apply to Bitcoin. Take a look at Bitcoin here. Bitcoin had the same kind of downtrend, but when we saw the breakout here, it shot up so strongly, and we know for sure that Bitcoin has risen much more dramatically than the altcoins. That's still the case right now, yes, but Bitcoin is showing us the direction, and the altcoins are following. I showed you this again recently most of the time. There's a delay of about 2 or 3 weeks with the altcoins where they catch up afterwards, especially with the altcoins. We can also bring in the M2 money supply, and there we also clearly see this correlation. When we rise here, we naturally also rise there. This correlation between the M2 money supply and especially the altcoins is enormous. You can really see here how identically we move, and accordingly, it's very encouraging that we're also reaching new all-time highs with the M2 money supply. Again, it's extremely important to understand. New all-time highs in the M2 money supply mean more risk capital for our altcoins. And I think, especially in this regard, you should definitely pay attention to how and what you do. Because you all know very well, many people have been saying over the past few months that there won't be an altcoin season and so on and so forth. But we've seen all of this in previous cycles as well, and yet a massive altcoin season still followed. And I think, or rather I believe, that the same thing can happen again now, because just 2 months ago the situation looked completely different. We had a sharp correction, people lost interest, everyone was afraid, they thought it was the end of the world, that there would be no more altcoin season, nothing at all. Just look at how dramatically Ethereum has risen. For weeks now, Ethereum has been outperforming Bitcoin by far. It was about time, of course. But you can clearly see how quickly things can turn around. And I think it's really, really important to understand this here. Of course, things will get really interesting when we see the drop in Bitcoin dominance and so on. No one knows exactly when that will happen, of course. But I think there's a reason we've positioned ourselves this way. We definitely did this on purpose, so that at some point we can see the drop here. At the moment, we're simply stagnating again in certain zones just to pick up some liquidity here. This could probably continue like this for a few more days, but then we should likely see a breakout here as well. Because as I showed you, we formed a golden cross here, and actually in the past that has indicated that we will see rising prices here again. What you can clearly see here is that we currently have a lot of trading interest again, so really open interest that is 3 times as high as in the last cycle. That's crazy. We have a lot of leverage here, a lot of volume slowly returning to the market, which is of course nice to see. But what's also good and nice to see here is that we're almost in balance. That's good. Accordingly, we definitely still have a chance for the next upward trend, for the next jump up, because if this were completely out of balance, the market makers would have to push us much more strongly in one direction so that things would be out of balance again. The best thing here is when things are roughly in balance, then the market makers can do whatever they want. And that's why this is currently a nice phase. And that's also why I can imagine that the market makers are already preparing the next bigger upward trend. Because even though we've had a nice upward trend with Bitcoin here, we're slowly entering the greed phase, but you don't see that yet across the entire market. We're not so overheated yet that you have to say we need a straight correction right now, even though a correction is definitely becoming overdue. But we're still not so overheated here that it has to happen tomorrow. And on the other hand, trading is still completely in balance here. That doesn't suggest that we're about to see a 20% correction. What's also insanely remarkable is that we can clearly see the Bitcoin balance on the exchanges is dropping drastically. By now, we only have 115,000 Bitcoins left at the OTC desks. And to be honest, that's really not a lot. All the Bitcoins are currently being withdrawn here, and we're getting closer and closer to a supply shock. Additionally, this last surge that we saw here yesterday and the day before was triggered by the news that Trump Media is planning to invest $3 billion in Bitcoin and crypto. Trump Media is Donald Trump's organization, which is behind the social media platform Truth Social, in other words, his Twitter knockoff platform. This organization is actually behind it, and they really are planning to invest $3 billion in Bitcoin here. I could imagine that this could turn into something similar to what happened with MicroStrategy in the future, that they'll get massive loans here, use them to buy Bitcoin, and leverage the whole thing on a completely different level, thereby massively increasing the company's value. It's really nice to see that. Whether it will actually happen that way is of course another matter, because with this, Trump was able to push the markets back up again. Of course it worked in the short term, but yes, now things have corrected quite a bit again as a result. A classic market maker game. Apart from that, right now I'm keeping an eye on the SUI project, for example, because I still really like the on-chain activity here. We've managed to build up very well here in terms of TVL. So you can clearly see that we have real utility here. We are seeing short-term stablecoin outflows here, but overall we've also had significant stablecoin inflows, and by now we are generating really large fees here with good DEX volume. It's just generally a great project that has developed extremely well. From a technical analysis perspective, we've also broken through this major resistance zone, and I'm expecting an upward trend for now. According to the Allegorith analysis, I'm expecting a 5, 6 or even 7 times increase from here, no matter what. That's why I also find this project very interesting, especially for the future, because the on-chain activity is already solid. The chart looks good, and that's why I'm also holding SUI for the long term. With XAI Network, we're seeing a similar phenomenon, because here too we've built up a strong on-chain presence. Of course, they're still far behind SUI, but things are gradually looking better here as well. The on-chain activity looks good, with more and more promising DEXs being built on it that are actually bringing in volume. And here too, from a chart perspective, we've seen a strong breakout from this zone. While SUI has definitely had a bigger upward trend so far, things are looking good here as well. Here I also expect long-term price targets of $2, $3, even $4. So I can definitely imagine an 8, 9 or even 10 times increase here as well. That's still a pretty conservative estimate. because this is also a project I'll definitely stay in for the long term since the on-chain activity looks good. On the chart, we've now seen a nice breakout here, which also points to a bullish upward trend and so on. And of course, Ondo can't be left out here either. In terms of on-chain activity, Ondo has really dominated everything. Take a look at how we're continuously building upwards here. Ondo is the absolute leader in the RWA sector. There really isn't any project that even comes close to it at the moment. Ondo is already providing real utility here, with a lot of capital already on the blockchain. And recently, we also found out that JP Morgan is now working with Chainlink and Ondo on their own RWA product. There's a reason they chose Ondo. In terms of TVL, it's excellent, so on-chain and activity-wise, things are looking very good. And with Ondo, we've finally broken through this intense downward channel. We've tested it many times, but now we've finally broken through it in a sustainable way. And you can really see the correlation between the various altcoins. They all tend to move in a pretty similar way. For Ondo, we expect these price targets in the medium term because we simply assume that this was wave 1, wave 2, and here is wave 3. We see $3.60 as a medium-term target for Ondo in the near future. I hope you enjoyed this video. You know what to do. As always, leave a like in the comment and see you next time, friends. Ciao.